Nobody warns you about winning. Every trading book covers losses. Every psychology video talks about fear, hesitation, revenge trading, and drawdowns. But nobody talks about what winning does to you. And winning does something subtle, something that feels like progress while it is quietly dismantling the discipline that produced the win in the first place. Here's what it looks like. You take a trade. It works. Clean entry, price moves in your direction, target hit. You close it, profit secured. And something shifts inside you that has nothing to do with the next setup. A feeling of elevation, of clarity, of being in sync with the market. You feel sharp, capable, like you understand something that was not clear before. And that feeling, that quiet, powerful surge of post-win confidence begins influencing the next decision before you are even aware of it. The next setup forms. It's close to your criteria, but not fully there. Normally, you would wait, but today you feel certain, so you enter. The trade after that, you size up slightly, just to press while things are working. The one after that, you skip confirmation because you already know where this is going. And somewhere in that sequence, in those 3 or 4 decisions that each felt individually justified, the discipline that produced the original win has been quietly replaced by something else. Overconfidence. And overconfidence in a probabilistic market that does not reward certainty will eventually be corrected. Usually by giving back everything the winning trade produced, and sometimes more. In this video, we are going to examine exactly what winning does to the trading brain, why confidence that comes from outcomes is the most dangerous kind, and what the internal shift looks like that allows professionals to win without being damaged by it. Because the goal is not to stop winning. The goal is to understand what winning costs you when it is not managed correctly. Let's go deep. Part 1. The illusion that winning means progress. Winning feels like improvement. This is one of the most natural and most misleading experiences in trading. You take a trade, it works, you profit, and immediately, automatically, without deliberate thought, the mind connects that outcome to skill. I am getting better. I understand the market. I have figured something out. But a single winning trade is not proof of skill. It is one outcome in a probabilistic system, a system that was always going to produce winning trades as part of its normal distribution. A trader with no edge, a trader flipping a coin on every entry, will produce winning trades, streaks of them, extended periods of positive outcomes that feel like evidence of skill, but are simply the probability distribution expressing itself. The problem is that the brain cannot distinguish between a win that came from genuine edge and a win that came from favorable variance. Both produce the same neurological response. Both feel like confirmation of skill. Both generate the same post-win confidence elevation. And that elevation, regardless of whether the win came from edge or luck, changes the next decision in the same direction. Toward more confidence, toward less caution, toward a slightly lower threshold for what qualifies as a trade. This is the illusion of progress. Not that winning is bad, but that winning feels like more evidence of skill than it actually provides. And that inflated sense of skill is what produces the behavioral changes that follow a winning trade and undermine the consistency that produced it. Part 2. The neuroscience of winning. Let's go inside the brain. Because the post-win confidence elevation is not a mindset issue, it is a neurological event. And understanding it explains why even disciplined, self-aware traders find their behavior subtly changing after a winning period. When a trade produces a profit, the brain's reward system activates. The nucleus accumbens, the dopamine reward center, releases dopamine in response to the positive outcome. That dopamine release produces the feeling of winning, the elevation, the sharpness, the sense of being aligned with the market. But dopamine does more than produce good feelings, it also influences risk assessment. Research in behavioral neuroscience has consistently shown that dopamine release following a positive outcome reduces the perceived risk of subsequent decisions. The brain, rewarded by the previous action, becomes more willing to repeat similar actions, more willing to take risk, less sensitive to warning signals, less responsive to criteria that might normally prevent entry. This is not a conscious decision, it is a neurochemical one. The dopamine released by the winning trade is still influencing the brain's risk assessment during the next trade, making marginal setups look more compelling than they would have before the win, making position size increases feel more justified than they would have before the win, making confirmation requirements feel less necessary than they would have before the win. There is also a second neurological layer specific to post-win behavior, the brain's pattern completion system. After a successful trade, the brain stores the sequence of decisions and behaviors that preceded the win as a successful pattern. And pattern completion drives the repetition of successful sequences, which sounds useful, but in trading, the behaviors that preceded the winning trade, the specific criteria, the timing, the confirmation, are often partially responsible for the win and partially coincidental. The brain cannot distinguish between the causal factors and the coincidental ones. It stores the entire sequence. And when repeating the sequence, it repeats all of it, including the parts that were incidental. This produces subtle variations in execution that were not present in the original trade. An entry that was slightly early, a confirmation that was slightly skipped, a size that was slightly larger, all of it feeling like repetition of what worked, all of it actually being a degraded version of what worked. Part 3. The confidence spike and its cost. After a winning trade, confidence increases. This feels healthy, natural, deserved. But not all confidence is the same. The confidence that follows a winning trade is outcome-based confidence. It rose because of a result, not because of an improvement in process, not because of a deepened understanding of the market, because a trade worked. And outcome-based confidence has a specific and dangerous characteristic. It rises faster than it should. One winning trade can produce a confidence level that suggests 10 winning trades worth of evidence. It feels disproportionately validating. And when confidence rises faster than the evidence justifies, it overshoots the level that supports disciplined behavior. It enters the zone of overconfidence. Overconfidence changes perception in specific ways. It makes the market appear more predictable than it is. It makes the trader's read of the market feel more reliable than it is. It makes risk feel lower than it actually is. And it makes the criteria that define a qualified setup feel flexible than they should be. The trader operating in an overconfident state is not making bad decisions because they stopped caring about discipline. They are making bad decisions because overconfidence has genuinely altered their perception of what constitutes a good decision. The marginal setup looks valid because the overconfident brain is applying less critical scrutiny. The increased size feels appropriate because the overconfident brain is underestimating risk. The skipped confirmation feels acceptable because the overconfident brain has elevated its certainty about the outcome. And all of this feels correct in the moment because the brain doing the evaluation is the same brain that has been altered by the dopamine from the previous win. It cannot see its own distortion. Which is why the post-win period is one of the most psychologically dangerous phases in trading, not because something bad has happened, because something good happened, and the brain responded to it in a way that makes the next bad thing more likely. Part 4. The subtle rule breaking. The behavioral changes that follow a winning period are rarely dramatic. They do not announce themselves. They arrive as slight variations that each feel individually justified. The first subtle change is the earlier entry. The setup is forming, but not yet complete. Confirmation has not arrived. In the previous session, before the win, this trade would have been left alone. But today, post-win, there is a feeling of certainty about where price is going, so the entry comes before the confirmation, just slightly, just because it feels obvious. And sometimes it works, which reinforces the behavior. The second subtle change is the acceptance of marginal setups. The criteria are not fully met, but they are close enough that the elevated confidence can construct a case for entry. The setup is almost there. The direction is right. The momentum looks strong. Close enough. The third subtle change is position size increase. After a winning trade, the logic of pressing while things are working feels compelling. The account is up. The system is working. Why not capture more from the next trade? So size increases, not dramatically, 20%, 30%, enough that a loss on the next trade is meaningfully larger than the planned risk, enough that the equity curve takes a hit that the original risk management would have prevented. The fourth subtle change is reduced confirmation requirements. The checklist that normally ensures every criterion is met before entry gets abbreviated, not because the trader consciously decided to skip steps, because the elevated confidence makes the additional confirmation feel unnecessary. The outcome feels predictable enough that the extra step seems like overcaution. None of these changes feels like breaking rules. All of them are, and collectively they represent a trader who has moved from edge-based execution to confidence-based execution. The edge requires specific conditions. Confidence does not care about conditions. It simply acts. And acting without conditions is not trading. It is gambling with good aesthetics. Part 5. The give-back cycle. What usually follows a strong winning period? A loss, or several. This is not inevitable in a strict sense, but it is statistically probable, because the behavioral changes that winning produces, earlier entries, marginal setups, increased size, reduced confirmation, create a deterioration in execution quality that increases the probability of losing trades. And when those losing trades arrive, they land on a trader whose confidence has been elevated to an unsustainable level, which means the fall is steeper than it would be from a neutral baseline. The loss does not just reduce the account, it collapses the elevated confidence, and the distance from the peak of post-win overconfidence to the trough of post-loss doubt is one of the largest psychological drops in trading. The emotional whiplash is significant. Winning produced elevation, certainty, aggression. Losing produces doubt, hesitation, caution. And the trader oscillates between these two states, performing well during the winning phase when confidence is high, performing poorly during the losing phase when confidence is low, never finding the stable middle ground where consistent execution lives, because the stable middle ground requires something that both winning and losing work against: neutrality. The ability to approach each trade with the same emotional baseline regardless of recent results. And neutrality cannot be achieved if winning is allowed to elevate the baseline, because what goes up must come down, and in trading, what comes down usually takes profits with it. Lessons from professional traders. One principle shared consistently among experienced traders regarding post-win behavior is this: treat a winning trade the way you treat a losing trade, with neutrality, not celebration. This does not mean suppressing positive emotion. It means not allowing positive emotion to alter the next decision. The professional acknowledges the win, notes it in the journal, confirms that execution was correct, and then approaches the next trade from the same baseline they would have approached it from if the previous trade had been a loss. Same criteria, same size, same confirmation requirements, same patience. Because the market does not adjust its behavior based on the trader's recent results. The next setup either qualifies or it does not, and whether the previous trade produced profit or loss is entirely irrelevant to that assessment. Another principle observed among professionals who have maintained consistent performance through extended winning periods: winning streaks require more discipline than losing streaks. This sounds counterintuitive, but it reflects a deep understanding of what winning does to behavior. During a losing streak, the trader is naturally cautious. The stress response is active. Hesitation is the default. Overtrading is less likely. During a winning streak, caution is replaced by confidence. The dopamine system is elevated. Aggression is the default. Overtrading is more likely. Standard erosion is more likely. Rule breaking is more likely. And the damage done during a winning streak in the form of increased size, marginal trades, and reduced confirmation often exceeds the damage done during the losing streak that follows. The professional understands this asymmetry and responds to winning periods with increased vigilance, not relaxed standards. The professional standard. Professionals treat wins and losses with the same emotional weight, not because they do not care about outcomes, but because they have learned that caring about outcomes in the wrong way produces exactly the behavioral distortions that destroy consistency. Their evaluation framework is not, "How much did I make?" It is, "Did I follow the process?" A winning trade that was executed sloppily is not celebrated. It is noted as a process failure that happened to produce a positive financial result, a random event that rewards poor behavior and therefore makes the poor behavior more likely to recur. A losing trade that was executed correctly is not mourned. It is noted as a process success that happened to produce a negative financial result, a normal expression of the probability distribution that requires no behavioral response. This framework, where process is the measure and outcome is just data, produces a specific and valuable characteristic: behavioral consistency across winning and losing periods. Because the evaluation metric does not change with results, it remains constant. And constant evaluation produces constant behavior. And constant behavior is the only foundation on which consistent edge can express itself. Let's get concrete. The first tool is the post-win protocol. After every winning trade, before the next trade is considered, run a 30-second reset. Step away from the charts. Take 3 slow breaths. Return to the trading plan and read the criteria for the next trade. This protocol interrupts the dopamine-elevated state before it can influence the next decision. It creates a gap between the win and the next trade that allows the neurochemical elevation to begin reducing. 30 seconds between the win and the next decision. That gap is where discipline is protected. The second tool is the post-win size lock. After any winning trade, position size for the next trade is locked at the predefined standard, not increased, not pressed, standard. This rule, written in the trading plan before any wins occur, prevents the most common and most costly post-win behavioral change, the size increase that turns a small profit into a large loss. The third tool is the win neutrality journal entry. After every winning trade, before any subsequent trading, write one sentence, not about the profit, about the execution. I entered at the correct level, honored my stop, and exited at my target. Or, if execution was not perfect, I entered early and the trade worked. This was a favorable random outcome, not a signal to repeat early entries. This journaling practice trains the self-evaluation system to measure wins by process rather than outcome. And as the self-evaluation system reorients, as winning becomes defined by correct execution rather than profitable results, the post-win confidence spike diminishes because the win is no longer evidence of superior market reading. It is evidence of correct process application, which was already the standard before the win, and therefore requires no change in behavior after it. The fourth tool is the winning streak alert. Define in advance the number of consecutive wins that triggers a mandatory review. For example, after 3 consecutive winning trades, review the last 3 trades for process adherence before taking another. Were entries taken at the correct levels? Were confirmations fully present? Were sizes standard? Were exits at defined targets? If yes, across the board, continue with heightened awareness of post-win overconfidence. If no, if any of the wins came from slightly compromised execution, reset to full standard criteria immediately. Because the wins that came from compromised execution are the most dangerous ones. They feel like evidence that the compromise was correct, that the marginal entry worked, that the skipped confirmation was unnecessary. And if not examined immediately, that evidence will make the next compromise more likely. Catch it early, before the pattern becomes established. Closing. The losses did not ruin your trading. The wins did. Not the wins themselves, what the wins told you about yourself, that you are sharper than you are, that you can read the market better than you can, that the criteria can be slightly relaxed because your instincts are reliable, that the size can be pressed because the system is working. None of that is true. The criteria exist because instincts are not reliable in a probabilistic market. The standard size exists because no single trade justifies elevated exposure. The confirmation requirements exist because what feels obvious is often noise. Winning does not change any of that. It just makes you feel like it does. And that feeling, that quiet, confident, entirely convincing post-win elevation, is the most expensive emotional state in trading. Not because it feels bad, because it feels good. Good enough to lower your guard. Good enough to relax your standards. Good enough to give back everything it produced. Manage the wins with the same discipline you apply to the losses, with the same neutrality, the same criteria, the same process. Because consistency is not built by avoiding losses. It is built by refusing to let wins change who you are. Your growth as a trader begins with self-awareness. The rest follows. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, control your mind.